it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Scottie Scheffler is your 2024 Masters champion. Welcome back to the Out of Bounds podcast. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here reacting to an absolutely spectacular weekend at Augusta National. Nate, holy cow. What a weekend. Maybe not the Sunday afternoon that the golf purist was hoping for, with Scottie Scheffler just putting the boots to everybody else, but still a pretty awesome weekend in Augusta, no?
Yeah, amazing. We saw a very different Augusta this year. We saw a lot of carnage on, Friday and Saturday, a little bit Thursday too, and then Sunday we saw a ton of birdies, like something we usually see a little bit in Augusta. Some low scores too, being registered by some guys. But yeah, Scottie Scheffler wins his second green jacket in 5 years. Josh, you famously said the 40% of his starts at Augusta National have been winners. We haven't seen a guy do this since I think Jordan Spieth was around the same age when he won or almost won his second. But he did win, of course. But it's just shocking. It's watching Scottie Scheffler is just like watching. He doesn't really make any mistakes. It's like watching almost a perfect golfer. Like when he does make a mistake, like on number 2 on Sunday, hits it way over the green. He gets up and down. He makes par. He lives to see the next day. Like number 7, he hits that second shot deep. He makes bogey. Then he birdies 8 and almost eagles 9. So it's like what you said about mistakes. He does make the occasional mistake, a miss a short putt, he'll have a tough shot here and there, but he bounces back from it. And it just goes to show how much you need to look at golf as the next shot. And not a lot of guys can do that, I don't think. But Scottie does it more better than anybody else on tour. Yeah,
Scottie Scheffler, I think he cemented himself as the guy in professional golf. 4-stroke win, obviously, Ludvig Aberg. 7 strokes ahead of Tommy Fleetwood, Max Homa, and Collin Morikawa. Incredible performance coming down the stretch because, like you said, every time that it looked like there was going to be an opportunity for somebody to either close the gap or catch him, we had that. I think there were 3 guys tied around 7, 8, 9 on the front of that final round. Every time someone got close, just like we've seen so many times before, he just puts his foot on the gas. And it's just, It's crazy because, there's always the Tiger comparisons, but he is just, he's incredible. He's incredible. Like he is, I think, the most unflappable golfer we've seen since Tiger. And I know there's a lot of talk always about Brooks Koepka in majors and how when he gets ahead, he is a stone cold killer. But, I think if you're comparing those two guys, you can't really compare the two of them adequately, I think, because of the kind of run that Scheffler's now been on. That's approaching 3 years long. He's winning majors. He's favored in most of the events he plays in. He leads the tour in most strokes gained categories. He has an absolute crazy number of top 10s, like 25 out of the last 32 events he's played. He's finished in the top 10, which is just insane by itself. To me, when I watch him play, and yesterday is a good example, like you mentioned a couple of those little anomaly mistakes that he'll miss a really short putt, or he'll misjudge the distance. Like this past weekend, it seemed to be his miss was misjudging distance with his irons, which was very uncharacteristic of him in this time span. But he doesn't need his best stuff to win, and that's the most Tiger-like thing that Scottie Scheffler brings to the table. He doesn't need his best stuff to win. Like everybody's talking about how improved his putting is. He's 96th on tour in strokes gained putting this year. 96th. He's below average. And he is the most dominant golfer on planet Earth. To think that there is still room for improvement, which there very clearly is. I don't think very many people can imagine just what the ceiling is for Scottie Scheffler, because he's doing this differently than a lot of people than we've seen anybody do it before.
And he's just such a cool cat too in those interviews right after the Masters and leading up to it too. He's talking about his wife Meredith delivering their first baby here towards the end of the month, and just talking about becoming a dad and how golf doesn't define him. Right? He's talking about how his family, he talks about his faith. He talks about all these other outside characteristics that really define him. So him being a father is just really, really cool, Josh. I think that's going to be really awesome. And maybe he'll unlock some of that dad strength we talk about, right? And see if he wins some more tournaments off that. But it's just so cool to see Scottie talk about it. They asked him in the Butler cabin, what you have a message for Meredith, who's back home, expecting their child. And he said, I'll be home soon. And so it's just a cool guy. He doesn't really get all really bunched up with what's going on. He kind of has his morals and he really sticks to them, and he does a really good job of that. He's someone that anybody in golf can look up to and say he's a role model, and that's for sure.
Yeah, he's grounded, right? He talked about his faith. It's interesting because, I think it's easy to sort of poke at the faith that he, does wear on his sleeve at different times. But, reporters really had to drag it out of him this past weekend. But what you really get out of him is that it's genuine. He's genuine and he's really grounded. When he's out there on the golf course, you and I noticed this last year at the PGA Championship. He's in his own world.
He's got no idea anyone's even playing.
Literally in his own world. And he kind of spoke to that a little bit during his presser after the interview in Butler cabin yesterday. He talked about how he doesn't let himself get too carried away and thinking about overthinking anything in particular. Basically said that he's very intentional about when he's spending that mental energy, when he's over a golf shot, when he knows he absolutely needs to be locked in. He thinks about the right things. The psychology of Scottie Scheffler might be the most interesting thing that I think most golf fans don't really understand yet, because he's still so new to the tour. It's crazy.
Yeah, he's 27 years old. It's shocking. We've talked about this a million times, right? Golfers get in their prime in their late 20s into their early 30s, right? That's when they play their best golf. Maybe a guy like Tiger Woods got to his prime a little quicker, but that's we know that story. But Scottie could rip off some more wins and some more major titles and keep it going. So it's just pretty cool, Josh. And yeah, to say he's grounded is for sure. I spoke about his faith there for a second, but yeah, you're totally right, Josh. You hit the nail on the head where he doesn't just talk about his faith. We see athletes, kind of do this sometimes, right? Where they they might win a tournament, or they win a race, or they win whatever they do in their sport, and they talk about their glory right away. And Scottie doesn't do that. He's very faithful guy. He's a very religious guy. But you really have to get it out of him, right? He doesn't want to just talk about it. So I think that's very, very cool from Scottie about how grounded he is.
Yeah, it goes to show, I think, how embedded in him it is, which is always awesome. Impressive, though, was Ludvig Aberg's performance coming down the stretch. My Lord, it looked for a stretch there that we could have potentially seen, a first-time winner at a major in his first attempt. Obviously, it didn't happen for him, but what did you take away from his performance yesterday? I know you're a big fan of his game overall. What'd you take from his performance?
He's so much fun to watch. He's kind of like Scottie in the way that he doesn't really show a lot of outside of emotion, right? He might have done a little bit on Sunday where he was smiling and smacking hands with the patrons, which is really cool. But he's very grounded in that sense too, where he's really focused on his golf game, and he kind of really goes back to his morals too in that sense. But Josh, he hit one bad shot. I mean, I was kind of going back through his round, and he hits one bad shot. He hits that shot on the water on 11, which is a no-no. That leads to a double bogey, which kind of really cemented him out of the tournament a little bit. He does kind of, he gets on 15, he hits it in on 2. He makes that long putt on 9 for birdie. He made a lot of really good shots, and he hit one poor shot. And I think that's really all he's going to look back at and say, this is the only thing I did poorly. But the thing is, Josh, if he played a perfect round and he's going up against Scottie Scheffler, I don't know if he still wins. I think anybody could have had a perfect round yesterday in their minds, and they're still seeing Jon Rahm put the jacket on Scottie Scheffler at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, look, even if they started tied, still his 3 under yesterday still wasn't enough to get it done. So, Scheffler still would have won by 1 stroke, and who knows how he would have played, really having to be in the passenger seat of that car with, Scottie Scheffler driving. I think that's different too. Aberg's performance was impressive, but I don't think it stands out from all of the rest of his performances. Like, he's got 11 top 10s in 23 starts. He's a winner. He's won. He finishes runner up in his first Masters, his first major. He's top 15 in strokes gained this season on tour. He played like it yesterday. Like, he's a stud, like you said, but I think the bigger thing is if you start to game this out and you start to look forward, if he is able to continue playing at the level that he's playing now, and he is able to, get a win or get a big win or another big-ish win in the next few months, we could start to see a rivalry develop here because, I think Rory McIlroy, just couldn't get it done. And I think in a lot of ways, we're starting to see some trends in his game that make us wonder about how much he can contend at that top level. Victor Hovland, we haven't seen him at all this year practically. Like, he looks like a completely different golfer who's a little bit lost. Yeah. Not to take anything away from those guys, but when we're talking about, European players of the future, man, there's a lot of promise for this guy. A lot of promise.
Yeah, and if I think we can talk about promising Europeans, we talk about Nikolai Holygaard too, who didn't play, didn't finish as well, but still played very well during the Masters tournament. Held the lead for a little bit on Saturday. Hit some unfortunate shots too with that string of bogeys he made coming in on Saturday. But still, him and he's got a twin brother Rasmus who's got game just like Nikolai. So I think that's just an amazing crop of European golfers. And I think I sent you a text on Saturday, Josh. I don't know how the Americans ever win the Ryder Cup ever again, but that's a talk for a different day.
I mean, there are some incredibly good golfers coming down the pipeline here out of Europe. But let's talk about a few Americans who were in contention at different times on Saturday and Sunday. Max Homa, Collin Morikawa, or Bryson DeChambeau. None of them ultimately were able to get it done. They all finished roughly in the top 10-ish. When you're thinking about those three guys, who walks away with the least disappointing weekend?
I don't think any of them are even disappointed in the slightest, in my opinion, right? We saw Bryson DeChambeau come out and really show everybody that he's not just this big beefy meathead YouTube channel. He's a golfer. He can play with the big guns too, right? So I think that was a really big spot for Bryson. Had a couple of little mental mistakes I think that he would like to see back. So maybe he's disappointed in that sense a little bit, but I still think he's able to take out a lot of positives out of the week. Max Homa builds upon this whole playing well in majors. He played well last year in the British Open and got a top 10 there. He now plays well in the Masters here, a tournament where he hasn't played well in his whole career, right? So he shows himself that he can also play with these guys. He famously said after the Saturday round that I'm going to remind myself that I'm a dog. And he was a dog on Saturday and Sunday. Didn't make enough birdies, which is unfortunate, but still was around until the final hole, I would say. And then Collin Morikawa. This is a guy we haven't seen much out of him. We know Collin missed the Ryder Cup last year, really played really bad, and it's easy to forget a guy like Collin Morikawa has 2 major championships, Josh. He's a guy that has been there before, has the experience, has the game too, and when he's swinging well and playing well, he's tough to beat as well. So I think it's a good week for Collin too as well. Did you have a disappointing factor out of those 3?
Yeah, look, I think with because of the resumes, and I take nothing away from Bryson for playing over and live. At the end of the day, these are guys who can win majors and have. I think the most disappointing out of the 3 of them is a split between Bryson and Collin. And I say that because Bryson was there. He fell out of it a little earlier, I think. So it felt less like it was this, collapse on Sunday. Collin, I hate to say this, but I understand that he's got a couple majors and, we all consider him among the best dozen or so U.S. players in the world. But at the end of the day, he is now in the same territory as, for me, as a Jordan Spieth or a Justin Thomas, who, because of time that has passed since the last major win and an inability to close, in big moments since, it really starts to build up. And I know they're not going to say, oh, this was a really disappointing day. I think with the position they were in, if you're Collin Morikawa, you're pretty disappointed because he even alluded to it afterwards. He said he took some chances in spots where he shouldn't have. He wasn't patient enough on Sunday. A guy with 2 majors needs to be patient, needs to be able to play like you've been there before. And I think that just kind of shows that it's tough. So I would say who had the least disappointing weekend? My answer is Max Homa. He didn't play that bad. His game showed the fewest cracks on Sunday. And, other than a bad break on 12, where his ball after that tee shot on the 12th hole hops on the back of the green or just on the fringe and just rockets forward. And unlike every other shot we saw go into that, into the pine straw where you've got the bushes and stuff back there, his stayed in.
Yeah.
it was definitively, I think, the worst break that anybody got on that hole the entire weekend. And it was the worst timed break because outside of that, he hit his irons incredibly well. He played really consistent. He putted well. He did everything that you were supposed to do. So, I think in terms of, who walks away from Augusta out of those 3 feeling like really good about their game and that their game is exactly where they want it to be moving forward, I feel like it's Max. Like you said, you pointed to his performance last year in the Open. I mean, his game is in a really great spot.
It sure is, and he hasn't manufactured that to wins as of late. He does have a bunch of wins on the PGA Tour, but he's getting that game where you just mentioned it, right, Josh? That major championship style game where we saw at Augusta, where you need to grind to make pars and you need to make birdies when you can and attack the par 5s, right? And that's something that Max really hasn't shown until late last year, and now he's showing it, that he can contend in these big, huge spots and win some big tournaments coming down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about old Tiger. The record's his, consecutive cuts. This isn't, I don't think this is going to be a record that non-golf fans, like the casual golf fan, really remembers for very long. This is definitely an intense golf fans record to have. I don't think it'll ever be touched. Do you think that consecutive cuts stat will ever be eclipsed in the next 20 years?
I don't know. Adam Scott might have a chance. I think he's right around 15.
So I was thinking about that. Yes, he is.
To say Adam Scott could get there, it's not unrealistic. I don't know if to say what could happen would be crazy, but it's not from a reality where Adam Scott gets there one day.
See, I feel like his age is the one thing that gets in the way for him. He's in his mid 40s.
Yeah, something like that.
So you have to play well enough to make the cut until he's in his low 50s minimally. That's tough. I feel like that's asking a lot.
Yeah, but a guy like Adam Scott, he's probably not. I think his game's going to preserve really well. He's got a beautiful golf swing.
That is true.
He's a good putter of the golf ball. He knows Augusta very well, obviously, being being a champion there and winning in the past. We've seen guys like Freddie Couples made the cut when he was in his 60s, right? Jose Maria Azadabal made the cut this week. So it's not, remember the Masters a little bit easier to make the cut than a lot of these tournaments. So I think Adam Scott could do it. I don't know if he does, but he definitely has the opportunity, I would think.
Yeah. I think it'd be tough too, because after Adam Scott, I'm not really sure there's anybody who will be able to do it, right? Other than a very, very select few guys out of this current crop, because, look at all the big names that missed cuts this weekend.
Right.
These are golfers that history's going to remember forever. Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, and they weren't even there this past weekend. Dustin Johnson. I mean, I think it's a hard record to touch after we get by this current crop.
24 straight cuts is unbelievable. And the fact that Tiger can do it too into his, his late 40s, his 48, and his body is rejecting it, right? This golf course at Augusta National, which is extremely hilly and that one that people say is the hardest walk in golf, and to do this year in and year out is just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was really interesting. Obviously, I think we saw the reality that Tiger Woods now faces moving forward, where he might be able to play good for rounds 1 and 2 but it will be really hard for him to string together 4 consecutive good rounds just because of his body.
Yeah, he got the tough draw in that sense too a little bit. He didn't get the chance to finish his round on Thursday due to that rain delay in the beginning. So he had to get up at the crack of dawn and play 25 holes on Friday. That's challenging for sure. And have to go through that warm up that he's talked about a lot. Having to get up hours upon hours before you teed off and make sure you're ready to go. But on Sunday, he did have one of the best swing coaches in the game here, Charlie Woods, helping him out before the matchup. That was pretty cool to see Josh on the range.
Yeah, it was for sure. And at the end of the day, it's just good for golf to see Tiger out there, especially on the weekend, making the cut at a major. It matters, and it's good for the game. Let's talk a little bit about this golf course. Some would argue, I guess, that this Masters felt a little bit more like a U.S. Open. You had rain Thursday, high winds on Friday, and it really dried out. It was a parking lot by like 5, 6 in the afternoon on Friday, and it only got worse on Saturday. And then Sunday, we still saw, even though they put an absolute ton of water on it Saturday night to try and soften things up a little bit, increase scoring some, still didn't dry out or still didn't soften it up that much. We still saw a lot of big bounces, a lot of heavy thuds from the golf balls landing on what felt like or looked like concrete. What do you make of the weather and the setup, in particular, the setup this past weekend?
I thought the grounds crew did a really nice job kind of dealing with what they had. They had some really harsh rain on Thursday and then some really crazy wind into the Thursday and Friday that dried the golf course out. And then on Sunday, they were able to, get those greens a little bit softer and the wind died down a lot. And they were able to see a lot of birdies and some really good rounds put in by some of these players. So I think they did a really nice job of kind of doing what Mother Nature gave them and doing the best to that spot. But Josh, it was interesting that watching the coverage on Saturday throughout the day and watching these guys struggle to make a lot of birdies. You have a guy like Max Homa made 17 pars and a bogey, and you have not a lot of birdies on the non-par 5 holes. Right, it was hard to see some of those putts drop in, especially with some of those pin positions on Saturday too, which were really fun to see. But I thought I was watching the coverage on Saturday like, oh, this is awesome watching these guys struggle. We always like to say that, right? We like to see that too. But then you get done with the coverage on Saturday and you're like, all right, I'm ready to see some birdies. I'm ready to see some guys go out and shoot some low scores. You're ready to see some 66s, some 67s being recorded. And that's exactly what happened, Josh. Tom Kim went out early, shot 66. A couple other guys did too as well. So I think that goes to show that Augusta really knew what everyone was wanting and really knew what I wanted. And I think some other people are going to share that sort of feeling about how we love to see carnage, but then we saw some really good golf on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, the course played 7,500 yards, but it's par 72. So you got a couple extra par 5s that, we don't always see in majors. I really enjoyed it. I still think the average golf fan, like you mentioned, wants to see birdies. They want to see scoring. For sure. But, I think it's good that it got a little better on Sunday. We were able to see some scoring. I think, again, proves the point that I've made over and over again on this podcast and in general. You don't need to stretch a golf course out to 8,000 yards or do anything crazy to make these guys work for it. There isn't even a lot of rough at Augusta, the golf course is, this is not a US Open style golf course in how it is actually set up. But a little bit of wind, some dry greens keeps the speed up on them. All of a sudden, scoring is at like 50% of what you'd see at a lot of golf tournaments throughout the year. So I like it. I don't necessarily know that the average person watching necessarily loves watching guys struggle to get bogeys and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it does go to show when the golf course is like that, it does go and show like how the draw is so important. Like Scottie got out there early on Thursday and registered, I think shot 68 on Thursday. And then, for these guys that playing later, it was really challenging, but you saw a guy like Max Homa do it. He put in a really good score Thursday night, and then Friday morning he finished off his round very well. So I think there's two sides of the coin on that one, but watching the guys having to struggle in a major championship and play what I call major championship type golf is really cool to see. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about guys who missed the cut. Of all of the big names that missed the cut, this past weekend. Do you have any particular one that stood out to you?
Yeah, I guess Dustin Johnson. I think that he was talked about a lot, and he was kind of the way he was kind of going into this tournament, especially with the live stuff. Talking about how live players played really, really well here last year, and Dustin kind of figuring out where he is in his career and what he wants to accomplish. Him flaming out and not even being close to making the cut was probably the most surprising for me.
Yeah, I think initially I thought Justin Thomas, and I still feel like that just because of. He was in contention walking to the 15th tee on Friday and plays the last 4 holes 7 over par. I think he went double, bogey, double to finish. I don't even know how anybody could explain it. I didn't even understand how it happened. Like, I didn't see it in the broadcast. They didn't really show it. But that is to me a shocking kind of outcome that I didn't see coming with how he had played the first day and a half or really first, 30 holes of the day. Victor Hovland's another one that was kind of surprising to me. And I mentioned it before, he finished 8 over, shot 81 in that second round. Like he was nowhere near anything. So to me, those two are pretty shocking.
That one video of him hockey sticking it around on Friday is kind of jarring too. You don't really see Victor do that on the putting green.
Yeah, it looked like mentally he just wasn't there. Like he didn't want to be there. Jordan Spieth, of course, is another name that a lot of people were talking about. I wasn't really surprised after seeing how he played last week. His
wrist is definitely bothering him too. He's got a problem with that wrist. So there's certainly something there. But yeah, it is disappointing for him to still miss the cut. But I'm interested to see what he kind of does going forward and how he kind of resurrects this season, because that wrist has certainly bothered him.
Yeah. And we don't have solid numbers yet on weekend, but the early returns on TV numbers are in. A lot of people have been talking about what the expectations were for this as far as TV viewership, because you had live guys playing with PGA Tour guys, and there was this entire dialogue about this is going to be the case study for why golf needs to be reunited. And it looks like it held true. Ratings were way up on Thursday and Friday. 3.2 million and 3.8 million per ESPN watching on Thursday and Friday. Maybe they lost some ground on Sunday with Scottie Scheffler carrying a 3-stroke lead through most of the back 9. I don't know. But I think this is going to be an opportunity for a lot of people to say in the golf world, we need the Brysons, we need the Brooks, we need all of the live guys. We need everybody playing together again. We do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think your argument, if you're a PGA Tour truther, is that, I think even if you had the live guys, if you didn't have the live guys, the numbers are going to be about the same. And I think that's partially probably true. But at the same time, if you're live, you're able to capitalize on this and show people that, like you said, Josh, we need to unify pro golf.
Yeah. And, I think and we can get into this now. How did you grade overall live players' performances when you take stock of everything that we saw? What'd you make of their individual performances?
Well, last year they were so good in the Masters. You had Patrick Reed, Brooks Koepka, and Phil Mickelson all in the top 5, and then you have Jon Rahm also in the top 5, who eventually became a live guy. But so it's really hard to compare that. They obviously weren't as good this year. But the big thing that really came out to me, Josh, was the quote unquote big guns, right? Didn't show up for them. Brooks Koepka T45, Jon Rahm T45, DJ missed cut like we just mentioned. Cameron Smith and Bryson DeChambeau, who are 2 of their main players, maybe not their big guns. I would put them, in the next crop of tier. Were very good. They both finished at T8. So it's hard to compare for last year, right? Because of how good they are. But I was just really surprised to see some of their bigger names in terms of Brooks Koepka and Jon Rahm, Dustin Johnson really struggle and miss cut or come in T45, like I mentioned.
Yeah, I feel like people have really high expectations for Brooks. And yes, he's played super well in U.S. Opens, in PGA Championships. Obviously, that's where all of his majors are. But at the end of the day, I guess I had tamer expectations for them. I just have trouble leaning into this, the live guys didn't show up argument when, Victor Hovland just played like an absolute dog,
Right.
like played completely awful. And, 6 months ago, we were talking about him being one of the 3 best players on the planet. Rory McIlroy, again, he didn't play poorly. It wasn't like he completely flamed out, but, that 77 on day 2 pretty much took him out of contention. He finishes 4 over. Patrick Cantlay, another guy who is in the quote upper echelon, but at the end of the day wasn't even vaguely in contention on Sunday.
He played better than Rory. I know he was right around even par.
They both finished in his high for 22nd at 4 over par total. So, that's to me, and obviously Scottie pulling away from the field kind of exacerbates things a bit, I guess. But at the end of the day, both sides, I think, had guys that didn't play well. I will say I was kind of pleasantly surprised by Cam Smith's performance.
Yeah.
Right?
He played very well.
He hung around, he didn't burn the place down by any means, but getting a top 10 finish again, I think it kind of furthers his legacy in a way to allow people to continue to think of him as one of the 10 or 15 best golfers on the planet, no matter what he's doing over in LIV. Which I think
even played well too, which we were kind of talking about too. He used T20, T22, and he was around for a little bit, played some solid golf too, and I think sort of validated what people have been talking about him for this year, about being one of the better players in the world. Didn't light the world on fire at the Masters, but didn't play bad.
Yeah, and I think one thing to really one thing to remember for anybody who's just casually watching this is any of these guys can show up to a major and win. Of the LIV guys who are now eligible, and I mean right now in this moment, eligible for majors, you can look at that list because it's not that long, and you can say any given major, would any of us be shocked if they went out and won? And the answer is no. And I think that's just basically where we are. Even at the quote unquote bottom of that list, I think a Patrick Reed or a Dustin Johnson who have looked the furthest from their quote unquote prime peak. If they went out and they won a major, I don't think anybody would really be that stunned because they're among the best 30, 40 golfers in the world. And we know that.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some guys in the Masters from LIV that if they went and won, I'd be surprised. But there's also guys in the PGA Tour that are like that too. You look at Charles Schwartzel, I'd be very surprised. Sergio Garcia, I would be surprised if he won the Masters in the year 2024 too as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we roll forward. We got the RBC Heritage down in Hilton Head, place I affectionately refer to as the greatest place on earth. It's right behind me for a reason. What are you looking forward to this? There's always so many complaints about the way the schedule is set up and having an elevated event immediately after a major. I don't think it's that big a deal to me. I like having this, having an elevated event immediately after a major because I think it capitalizes on the energy and the positivity that you catch from a major. Is it?
Yeah. Right.
The players probably hate it.
I mean, the players can't hate it too much because we're going to put all this money to pro golf, right? We're going to do all these elevated events. We got to play them sometime in a year where we're going to Paris to play the Olympics, and you have to do that too. That condenses the schedule a little bit more, and you keep playing these elevated events. You got to play them sometime, and the drive from Augusta to Hilton Head isn't too bad. So I think players will be okay with that. I'm sure a lot of them are taking the day off today, maybe even tomorrow, or getting that half day in tomorrow at Hilton Head, and maybe playing 9 and getting through that and kind of making sure their body gets what they need. Josh, but do you have a pick for us? Have you been looking at it at all, or not quite yet?
I haven't, and I think of course you've got somebody like Scottie Scheffler, I guess, who is just like an automatic favorite. But
I guess a better question is, do you like someone that played in the Masters and that played well in the Masters, or someone that maybe missed cut at the Masters and got a chance to rest their brain a little bit and get ready for this next tournament?
We're
Victor Hovland?
We're reaching a point now where I'm finding it very hard to pick against Scottie Scheffler.
Yeah.
Very hard. Very, very hard. He is now we're at 3 of his last 4 starts.
Right.
And that other one,
and the one star he was close to.
Yeah, that outlier was a second place finish. So I mean, like, what are we doing here? Like, I would like to see a guy like Jordan Spieth or someone like that, come back and have a good week. I think it would be good for golf if it happened. My question for the people who are going to go out and pick Scottie Scheffler is, he didn't have his child this week, but at some point here he's going to, and he's made it clear that when that happens, he's done, out, right? He's gone. So, I probably wouldn't pick him this week for that reason. Maybe Fitz, can Fitz get it done?
Yeah, he was in the playoff last year, right? I like a guy that didn't have to grind on Saturday and Sunday at the Masters. I think, being able to kind of give himself a little bit of break. So you look at a guy like Wyndham Clark, I think can play really well this week. Also, I think Victor Hovland, I think any certain weekend he can do that. But going back to Scottie, I think it's just really, really interesting that he talks about just leaving the Masters, Josh, if Meredith did go into labor, right? And so I think he would have no problem leaving the RBC Heritage next week. If she does go into labor, it's a little easier to leave that tournament than the Masters, right? But it goes to show how it just kind of puts a bow on our conversation about how grounded he is, that this cares. The birth of his first child is way more important than him ever winning the Masters. And that's just cool. Yeah.
Just to run through quick, the top 10 in odds: Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Ludvig Aberg, Matt Fitzpatrick, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Cantlay, Will Zalatoris, Tommy Fleetwood, Max Homa. Out of those 10 names, if you had to pick one of those, who are you picking?
Wyndham Clark.
Wyndham Clark.
And the only reason I have is that he's played well this year. He didn't play well at the Masters. He wasn't, he was his first time playing in the Masters, so it's really hard unless your name's Ludvig Aberg or Fuzzy Zoeller to play well and you're in your first Masters start. But I just think he has kind of all the moxie too. We've talked about him a little bit here on this podcast, but I still haven't got my deep dive into this week at RBC Heritage, but that's a name that kind of pokes out to me, just looking at the odds.
Give me Ludvig. Sure. Give me him to capitalize on a good weekend. He left. I think he was able to leave with some really good vibes on top of just playing well and not feeling like he lost the golf tournament for himself. And statistically, he's been on a tear. So,
and he's a young guy. He can keep moving with those legs and that momentum that he has. He's not going to get tired. That's for sure.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll have more on this on TikTok and YouTube over the next few days for sure. Hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. We will be back next week with the recap. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram for more as well. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.